The cold, grey light of a Monday morning on Park Avenue did little to soften the city's hard edges. It was a world in perpetual, impersonal motion, a river of sleek black cars and lumbering city buses flowing between canyons of glass and steel. The air, thick with the scent of exhaust and damp pavement, echoed with a symphony of blaring horns and the distant wail of a siren. On the sidewalks, a flood of executives surged forward, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of their phones, their expensive suits a uniform of ambition and detachment. Each person was an island, moving with a relentless urgency that left no room for anyone who couldn't keep pace. It was a place where success was measured in speed and visibility, and where stopping, even for a moment, was a form of failure. The opulence was suffocating, a constant reminder of the vast distance between those who commanded the city and those who were simply trying to survive it. At the edge of this chaotic current stood Chloe Miller, her hands gripping the wheels of her manual chair. The simple act of crossing the street had become a monumental challenge. Cars whipped past in a seamless, unforgiving stream, their drivers seeing only the traffic light ahead, not the woman waiting at the curb. Pedestrians flowed around her like water around a stone, their gazes fixed forward, deliberately avoiding eye contact. She wore a simple navy blazer and slacks, clothes that were clean and well cared for, a quiet testament to her dignity in a world that seemed determined to strip it away. Each passing car, each averted glance, was a small, sharp sting, reinforcing a feeling of invisibility she fought against every single day. Yet, in her expressive eyes, beneath the flicker of frustration, there was a spark of unyielding hope, a belief that her worth was not defined by the indifference of strangers. Sealed inside the quiet, leather-scented cocoon of a cherry-red Ferrari, Alexander Pierce ended a phone call with a sharp, frustrated sigh. The world outside the tinted windows was a blur of motion he usually ignored, a backdrop to his own relentless drive. He was the very picture of the power that defined this street, a custom-tailored Italian suit, a watch on his wrist that cost more than most cars, and the weary expression of a man who had conquered the world only to find it empty. At 42, he was a self-made billionaire, the CEO of a tech empire, yet a profound loneliness haunted him, an invisible weight that no amount of success could lift. His eyes, though sharp and intelligent, held a deep, chronic exhaustion, the look of a man living in a gilded cage, surrounded by everything and connected to nothing. His gaze drifted from his phone to the street, and for the first time that morning, he truly saw something. He saw Chloe. He saw her determined posture, the subtle slump of her shoulders with each car that sped past, the flicker of solitude in her eyes. It was an expression he recognized, a reflection of a pain he carried deep within himself. In that instant, something shattered his carefully constructed apathy. On pure impulse, an instinct he hadn't felt in years, he pulled the Ferrari to a screeching halt by the curb, ignoring the angry honks that erupted behind him. He switched on the hazard lights, opened the door, and stepped out into the cold city air. The world seemed to slow as he approached her, his movements gentle and uncertain. He stopped before her, and in a voice softer than he knew he possessed, asked the question that would change everything. "Excuse me, ma'am, do you need help getting somewhere?" Chloe stared at him, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. A man in a Ferrari, offering coffee. It felt like a scene from a movie, too unreal for the harsh reality of her life. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to protect the fragile shell of dignity she rebuilt each morning. Yet there was a sincerity in his eyes, a weariness that mirrored her own, that disarmed her. The offer was not one of pity, but of shared humanity. After a long moment, the wall around her heart cracked just enough to let a single word escape. "Okay," she whispered, the sound barely audible above the city's noise. For Alexander, that simple agreement felt more significant than any contract he had ever signed. It was a bridge across the chasm of his isolation, a step into a world he had long since forgotten existed. Getting into the small, crowded coffee shop was an ordeal in itself. Alexander, accustomed to a world that bent to his will, was suddenly confronted by the sharp angles of reality. Narrow doorways, tables packed too closely together, the subtle and not-so-subtle stares of other patrons. He saw the flicker of annoyance in their eyes, the brief, dismissive glances that Chloe had learned to endure with a practiced calm. For him, it was a startling and shameful revelation. He had lived his entire life in a self-imposed bubble, completely blind to the daily, exhausting battles fought by people just a few feet away from him. He found an accessible table in a corner, his movements now careful and deliberate, a stark contrast to the effortless command he usually projected. He was a king in a foreign land, his power utterly useless. As they sat with warm cups between their hands, the steam rising like a fragile truce, Chloe began to speak. She didn't recount the trauma of the accident. The physical scars were enough of a testament to that. Instead, she spoke of the aftermath, the slow, arduous process of reclaiming a life. She described the frustration of navigating a world not built for her, the sting of being defined by her chair instead of her mind. With a quiet passion that captivated Alexander, she talked about her work as a graphic designer, her portfolio filled with vibrant, innovative ideas that she desperately wanted to bring into the world. Her voice was steady, devoid of self-pity, infused with a resilience that seemed as strong and unyielding as the city's skyscrapers. Alexander listened with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. He wasn't the CEO of a tech empire in that moment. He was just a man, humbled by the strength of the woman sitting across from him. Each word she spoke chipped away at the cynical armor he had built around his heart. He saw not a person in need of saving, but a warrior. Her unwavering determination reminded him so painfully of his younger sister, Lily, who had possessed that same fiery spirit, that same belief that she could conquer the world with her dreams. The memory was a sudden, sharp ache in his chest, a ghost of a grief he had never properly faced. He pushed the thought away, focusing on Chloe, feeling an overwhelming, unfamiliar need to protect the light in her eyes. It's truly remarkable how a single, focused moment of human connection can make a person feel whole again after they've been fractured by indifference. The world rushes by so quickly, and we often forget the profound impact of simply stopping to see someone. If these stories that highlight the power of empathy touch your heart, subscribing to our channel allows us to continue sharing these vital reminders. Your support helps us amplify voices that are often ignored, proving that kindness is a currency that can truly change the world, one small gesture at a time. It's a way to ensure these narratives of hope and healing continue to find their way to those who need them most, perhaps inspiring them to create a similar moment for someone else. After their coffee, a silent understanding passed between them. Alexander drove her the few blocks to her interview, the purr of the Ferrari's engine a stark contrast to the quiet intimacy that had formed inside the car. He waited for her, the minutes stretching into an hour, feeling an uncharacteristic nervousness on her behalf. When she finally emerged from the building, the anxious tension in her shoulders was gone, replaced by a radiant, hopeful energy. She told him it had gone well, that they had focused entirely on her portfolio, her ideas, her talent. A genuine, unrestrained smile broke across her face. And in that moment, Alexander felt a profound sense of purpose that all his billions had never managed to buy. It was a feeling of pure, uncomplicated joy, a shared victory against a world that had tried to hold her back. A few days later, Chloe received the call she had been dreaming of. She had gotten the job. Her happiness was a brilliant, shining thing, and the first person she wanted to share it with was Alexander. She called him, her voice bubbling with gratitude. insisting that his act of kindness had given her the confidence she needed to succeed. But that initial euphoria soon began to fade, tainted by the harsh realities of her new environment. Whispers followed her down the hallways, quiet insinuations that her position was not earned but gifted. Colleagues would praise her work with a knowing look, implying her connection to the billionaire who stopped traffic was the real reason she was there. Each comment was a small cut, slowly bleeding the confidence she had fought so hard to regain. Alexander, meanwhile, faced his own form of resistance. His world, built on ruthless efficiency and calculated risks, had no room for spontaneous acts of compassion. His board members and closest advisors were bewildered by his sudden shift in focus. They saw his time with Chloe as a dangerous distraction, an emotional liability in a world that demanded cold logic. His longtime partner, Marcus, confronted him directly in his sterile, glass-walled office. "What is this, Alex? A midlife crisis?" he asked, his tone a mixture of concern and condescension. "You build empires. You don't waste your time on charity cases." The words were meant to shock him back to his senses, but they had the opposite effect, hardening his resolve and illuminating the profound emptiness of the world he inhabited. The external pressures began to create a subtle but undeniable rift between them. Chloe, fiercely independent and terrified of being seen as a project, started to pull away. She politely declined his invitations for dinner and insisted on navigating her own challenges, no matter how difficult. Her fight to be seen as an equal inadvertently pushed away the one person who had seen her as more than her chair from the very beginning. Every offer of help from him, no matter how well-intentioned, felt to her like a confirmation of her colleagues' whispers, another layer of obligation she couldn't bear. She was caught in a painful paradox, wanting his connection but fearing the power imbalance it represented. Alexander was left confused and hurt by her sudden distance. He couldn't comprehend that his attempts to make her life easier were perceived as a form of control, a reminder of a debt she never asked for. His wealth, once his greatest asset, had become a barrier, turning simple gestures into grand, complicated statements. He wanted to share his life with her, but he didn't know how to do it without his power and influence overshadowing everything. He was a man who could solve the most complex technological problems, yet he was utterly powerless to bridge the emotional chasm growing between them. The more he tried to get closer, the more she retreated, leaving him alone with a familiar, aching loneliness. There are moments in life when you are forced to look at the entire structure you've built and question its very foundation. For Alexander, meeting Chloe was that moment, a seismic event that shook his world to its core. He was beginning to understand that his pursuit of success was a hollow victory. It's a profound realization, and by subscribing, you help us continue to explore these powerful journeys of self-discovery. Your support ensures we can keep sharing stories that challenge our perspectives and remind us that true wealth is measured in connection, not in currency. These narratives are more than just stories. They are maps that can guide us back to what is truly important in our own lives. The confusion and pain of Chloe's withdrawal unearthed a deeper, more terrifying truth within Alexander. His desperate need to help her was intrinsically linked to the guilt he carried over his sister's death. Lily had been so full of life, so ready to fight for her dreams, and he had been driving the car that rainy night. He had failed to protect her. Now, he saw Lily's unrealized potential in Chloe's struggle, and his impulse to clear her path was a desperate attempt to atone for his past. He wasn't just helping Chloe, he was trying to save Lily, to rewrite the one tragic ending he could never change. This realization terrified him, making him question if his help was a lifeline or an anchor, potentially drowning her in the depths of his own unresolved grief. The setting was a quiet corner of an elegant restaurant. the kind of place where conversations are hushed and the clinking of silverware is a delicate counterpoint to the city's distant hum. But for Chloe and Alexander, the silence was a suffocating weight. After weeks of piecing together fragments of information, a cold, hard truth had settled in her heart. She finally looked at him, her expressive eyes clouded with a pain that was deeper than any physical scar. Her voice, when it came, was a low tremor of controlled emotion. "My company just landed a major contract with your firm," she stated, not as a question, but as an indictment. "It wasn't my portfolio, was it? It was you. All of it. I wasn't an opportunity you saw. I was a project you funded. I don't need your pity, Alexander. I just needed a real chance." Alexander felt the words like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. He opened his mouth to offer a denial, to explain the corporate machinations that were far beyond his daily notice, but the defense died on his lips. It wasn't the logistics of the contract that mattered. It was the look of utter betrayal on her face. He saw the proud, resilient woman who had captivated him from the first moment, now believing her greatest professional achievement was a lie, a carefully orchestrated act of charity. In that instant, the billionaire CEO, the titan of industry, vanished. All that remained was a man stripped bare, his carefully maintained composure shattering like glass. He looked down at his hands, unable to meet her gaze, the weight of her accusation crushing him with a truth he hadn't even admitted to himself. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a profound, ancient sorrow. "It wasn't about the job," he whispered, his voice raw and unfamiliar. He began to speak, not of business deals or influence, but of a rainy night years ago. He told her about Lily, his younger sister, whose laughter was the brightest sound in his world. He described her passion, her fierce belief that she could change the world, her dreams that were just beginning to take flight. He recounted the accident with a chilling, detached precision, the slick asphalt, the blinding headlights, the horrifying screech of tires that he still heard in his sleep. He confessed the guilt that had been his constant companion ever since, a cold, dark void that all his success had never been able to fill. He had been driving the car that stole her future. He leaned forward, his hands clenched on the table, his gaze locked with hers. The plea in his eyes was for more than forgiveness, it was for understanding. "I didn't see you as a project, Chloe," he said, each word heavy with the weight of his confession. "I saw in you the life that was taken from me, your fight, your refusal to be invisible, your beautiful, stubborn dignity. It was everything she was, everything she would have been, helping you. It was never about saving you. It was about saving myself from the darkness I've lived in since I lost her." The raw honesty of his words washed over Chloe, extinguishing the last embers of her anger. She wasn't looking at a powerful man who had pitied her, but at a broken brother who was drowning in grief. The suffocating tension in the air dissolved, replaced by a fragile, sacred stillness. The chasm of misunderstanding that had opened between them was suddenly gone, bridged by the shared language of loss. Chloe slowly reached across the polished wood of the table and placed her hand over his. The simple touch was an anchor, a silent acknowledgement of his pain and a testament to her own. There were no more accusations to be made, no more defenses to be offered. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the muted sounds of the city, their connection was fundamentally transformed. It was no longer a bond forged by a chance meeting and an act of kindness, but one cemented in the shared understanding of two wounded souls who had finally shown each other their deepest scars. They could now begin to heal, together. That single, shared moment of vulnerability became the unshakable foundation of their new life. Their relationship was not a fairy tale of a billionaire saving a damsel in distress, but a quiet, steady partnership built on mutual respect. Alexander began to see the city through her eyes, noticing for the first time the thousand small indignities of a world not built for everyone. The cracked sidewalks, the heavy doors, the staircases that stood like fortresses. Chloe, in turn, saw past the empire to the man, the lonely brother who carried a silent grief. She taught him how to find joy in small moments, while he learned that his greatest power was not in commanding boardrooms, but in simply holding her hand, offering a steady presence as they navigated the world together, as equals in every sense of the word. Inspired by Chloe's unwavering spirit and driven by a newfound purpose, Alexander did something that shocked the financial world. He stepped back from the daily operations of his company and poured his energy and a significant portion of his fortune into creating the Lily Foundation. It was not a gesture of charity, but an act of love and atonement. With Chloe as its chief visionary, the foundation became a powerhouse for change, funding innovative assistive technologies and launching aggressive urban accessibility projects across the city. Chloe's first-hand experience guided every decision, ensuring their work was practical, impactful, and designed with dignity at its core. They weren't just building ramps, they were building bridges back to the world for thousands of people who had felt as invisible as Chloe once had. The results were transformative, rippling out in ways they never could have imagined. Parks became more welcoming, public transport more accessible, and a city known for its indifference began a public conversation about inclusion. Alexander found a fulfillment that his billions had never provided, a profound sense of peace that came from seeing the tangible good his sister's memory was creating. He had traded the relentless pursuit of profit for the quiet satisfaction of making a difference. It's a powerful reminder that a life's true legacy is written in the lives we touch. We are so deeply grateful to everyone who subscribes, because your support is what allows us to share these stories, proving that one person's journey can indeed inspire a world of change. 2 years later, they stood on Park Avenue at the very spot where their lives had collided. The chaotic, unforgiving intersection was gone, replaced by a beautiful, fully accessible pedestrian plaza, the Foundation's flagship project. The air was filled with the sounds of children laughing and the gentle hum of a city that felt a little kinder, a little more human. Alexander squeezed Chloe's hand, his eyes no longer holding the exhaustion of a lonely king, but the warm, steady light of a man who had found his way home. He had stopped his car that day to help a stranger cross the street, but in doing so, he had finally helped himself cross the vast, empty chasm of his own grief, finding on the other side not just love, but a life of true and lasting purpose.